Rightio guys, this morning we've got a 2007 Toyota LandCruiser VDJ 76 front diff. We're going to be putting the mechanical locker, front locker from four-wheel drive systems in. I thought I'd do a quick video to share how to do it because I couldn't find anything online and it might be helpful for some other people. So straight up we've gone through and marked everything so we know it goes back together in the right spot. We've got a marking for the bearing carriers, marking for the adjustments, marking for the locking tabs and each bolt. I've also gone through and marked the backlash and put a number, 0.2 millimeters. I did that in 4 places as per the recommended instructions, and then we've also put a mark next to it so that it goes back to the same spot when we rebuild it. Again, on this side we put a different marking, number 2 on this side. Same with the bolts for the bearing carriers, 2, and then the adjuster as well. So the next step is we'll crack all these bolts off the crown wheel, get that loose before we split this apart and put it on the bench and start stripping the rest of the diff. Righto, so we've got the diff on the bench now, so we're just going to go ahead and get the crown wheel off. Just give it a light tap evenly all the way around till it pops off. And now that we've got the crown wheel off of this spigoted face here, we're going to go ahead and remove all these bolts here to split this section of the housing away so that we can get to the gears section inside and do the replacement of the new parts. So I've got the bolts out. Now what we want to do is pull this top housing section off. This here will work as your telltale for when it goes back together. So you can see there it's pretty obvious. Now what isn't obvious is the way that these pins go back in. So what I've done here is marked a C on the pin towards the crown wheel and then a match mark line there just for reference. I've not done this before, so I'm putting more and more marks on than I probably need to. It's better be safe than sorry. So this is it with the top cover off. Now one thing you will read online is the importance of the shim spacers or the thrust washers, whichever one you want to call it. The idea of these is to set the gear meshing for your little gears here. So that is very important to make sure they go back in the right position. So what I'll be doing on this side now is setting up the bench so that we have the left and the right, and the two shall never meet when we start stripping the parts off. So in the off chance that we want to put this diff back to normal, I've marked on here AA, B, B, C, C and D, D. Now the reason for that is because the back faces of these, as you can see, are worn, so it actually forms some form of bearing. So we want to make sure that the wear patterns on the back of each of the teeth and the gears and this little thrust washer go back to the same spot if we ever need to go back to a standard diff. Also, another little trick I like to do is to bag everything. So we've got the whole entire front end stripped out on this diff. So the reason is I'm going to be doing the bearings, the seals, the whole lot basically. So on the bench, we've got everything from the sprayed line. Here is the left-hand side, and again, everything is bagged and tagged in what sections they come from. Saves rummaging through a big bucket of parts at the back end of the job. Got the new gears fitted with the bearings. So put those back in, slip the gears in. Now we want to put the spacers on, both of them. Put the pin section back in. Now we want to check the clearance between the spacer and the pin. You can see that's quite loose. So we'll go ahead and use a feeler gauge just to check that clearance between there with the cap back on, and then we'll flip it over, use gravity as our friend and do the same thing on the other side. I'll see if I can set the camera up to film as I go. Okay guys, so I know the tolerance is 6 to 20 thou in Imperial, which is about 0.15 to half a mil. So I'm just going to go around and do half a mil and see if I've got anything and work down from there. I know that I've definitely got more than 0.15. 0.45. 0.5, nope. 0.5, nope. 0.5, nope. Rightio, so that's all good. I can't get any 0.5s in, which is the top tolerance. And it's sitting around that 0.4, 0.45. Okay guys, so if you can't get a real good feel, there is another way. You can set your dial indicator up from the base to the ring, and then just softly lift the ring and see if you get a clearance. Now, the numbers that I got match pretty closely to the dial indicators. I'll just see if I can show you. So just put a bit of downward pressure on the pins so you don't move them. And that's about 0.48. Just got to keep the square across all 4 of the pins. You should be able to get a pretty consistent reading. 0.48. Rightio, so after the clearance check against the pins, we want to do the clearance check between the cams. So what we'll do is leave the shaft out so we can measure around this area here with the feeler gauges, and then we'll put the top cam, or sorry, the left or right cam, whichever way you're looking at it, on top of here, put the case back together, take the measurements, split it apart again. So again, we want to line up our match marks, like so. Now I normally just hold the spline inside. I say normally, I've learnt that since I started. And that is clicked in. Grab it, flip it, and put a couple of bolts in. Just want to nip it up so we can get this measurement. Now I've already set these with a micrometer to the 4.2, which is the maximum clearance. It's probably just a little bit under that actually, it's about 4.16. So 4.1 or 4.2 is the top, and then 3 point something is the bottom. So if we'll see where we're at first, and then we'll start mucking about. So as I look through the holes here, I can see that all the gear teeth are engaged. So we know that the springs are working properly and everything's where it needs to be. That 3.16, 4.16 is just a tad tight. So we'll box this down a little bit, take another 0.5 out of it. So this will be down to 4.1, 4.009, 4.09. 4.09. So that's it there. So we're good. So just to give you an idea of how untechnical we are, the video stand you're seeing this from at the moment is my cup and my drill press. Righto, that's it for all the checks now. Make sure that your marks lined up. They'll get final tension once they're back inside. Over. And let's give this a bit of a clean up. Make sure there's no dirt or members on the spigot face of your crown wheel. Find your match marks. Find your match marks. Now, trick for this one is to, once your match marks are lined up, get one of your bolts and make sure your bolt starts. Otherwise, it will be in strife when it comes to fitting it. Okay, that's good. We might use another trusty associate. Now just when you're coming down the spigot, just keep an eye on how far your gaps are. You want to make sure that you're bringing the gear down nice and even. And you can start rebuilding these. Okie dokie, so we've got it all back together now. Now with this, there seems to have been a little bit of an issue trying to get it all back together with these caps as they were without touching the adjusters. So what I did is remove this one, and as you can see, I've got a mark here from the original set point. Undid the nut by one full rotation, gave me enough clearance to fit the bearing caps, and then I was able to do this back up to the preset value as it was found. So all we'll do now is recheck the backlash, make sure that we're back to around that 0.2 area, and then we are good to go. Good little note is when you're working with gears and bearings, oil them up, get them running, get them moving. They might not be sitting it fully at home. When I first did this, the backlash was down around that 0.12 to 0.14. So we've given it a bit of a lube up, got it rotating as much as we can, and then we'll check it again and see where we're at. Rightio, so we've got it back in. Just keep in mind there's a little bit of a knack to making sure the threads reline up with the bottom or the main housing. So just use your bolt as a guide once you're in to see where you're at, and then also you can look through the bolt hole to see if you're lined up. So you want to not use a rattle gun, just use a spanner so that you can make sure you're loose and you're not going to damage the thread internally as you're doing it up. Just to give you an example of what I mean by this, this is the bearing cap. It looks pretty close. Looks like it's only got a little tiny bit of a rock there. However, that means that the adjuster is all locked up and not sitting in threads properly. Whereas if I come over to the correct position, one thread over, you can see that the housing is at home and the thread's loose. Very important, very, very easy to end up damaging the thread on your adjuster. Okay, so we're all set up here with the backlash check, and we are now at 0.18. So look, I'm not going to chase 0.02 of a millimetre. 0.18 is sufficient